This is Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles from Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. Retirement isn't just about saving, it's about having a strategy that helps you navigate market ups and downs, combat inflation, and secure the future you deserve. That's why Financially Fit Radio is here to tackle your biggest financial concerns, share actionable strategies, and help you move toward your retirement goals with confidence. And now, here's Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles.
Welcome back to another episode of Financially Fit Radio. I'm Cory Sickles with Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. If you'd like any information about anything that we discussed today, feel free to give us a call at 614-760-0670, or you can always visit our website at safeharboroh.com. And while you're on our website, feel free to click on that radio page. You can listen to today's show, previous episodes, and you can also subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Spotify. Also, feel free to check today's show out on our YouTube channel. Just type in Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. You can watch this episode. You can watch previous episodes. You can also subscribe, be kept up to date when we put our video shorts out, which are about 3 or 4 video shorts a week on different types of financial topics. You know, we're here to help and make sure that you have the best retirement that you can. So just remember, when you do schedule, all meetings are complimentary. There's no financial obligation. We're truly here to help you. Well, today we're going to talk about, there's some, breaking news earlier this week. It's the China Tariff Truce. And we're also going to talk about, are we in a recession? Are we worried about going into a recession? And how should you prepare financially in order to handle if we do go into a recession? Before we dive into those topics, let me introduce to you my co-host this week and every week, and that's Tony Shore. Tony, how are you?
Cory, I'm happy to be here. This is going to be a great show today, and it sounds like you've got some timely topics. We're going to talk about the China tariff truce that just happened. Is there going to be a recession? And if so, how do you prepare for something like that? Eventually, it seems like we have one every so often, so being prepared is good. But besides that, I've been great. I've been getting outside, trying to enjoy the weather, working around the yard. How about you? What have you been up to?
Just so everyone knows, we actually, Tony and I record this on Mondays. So this weekend, which has been Mother's Day weekend.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you could actually have a better weather-wise, at least in Columbus. I don't know about how it was in Minneapolis.
Perfect. It was perfect.
It was perfect. Got to play some golf. Got to spend time, with my mother. It was a good time. Got some yard work done. Now that's kind of getting into season. Kind of looking forward to be able to sit out on the deck here at night, and just enjoy. This is really getting into the best time of the year.
Yeah, I would agree. The weather has been perfect lately. I had a great Mother's Day. Saw my mom as well and celebrated with her and with our kids. My wife and I got to get together with the kids, went on a nice long walk, just hung out. So that was great. It was a great weekend. We couldn't have asked for a better weekend. That's true.
Yeah. It was a great weekend. And, May. So one of the things that May kind of brings us, Tony, is from, you have different types of financial topics or awareness on a monthly basis. And this month is actually disability. And what you really should know about disability. We're going to bring Joe on here to kind of talk about Medicare and the effects that disability can actually have on Medicare or healthcare.
Hey, Joe. Everybody. Hey, how are you?
We're doing good. How are you?
We are doing good.
Good. Kind of recovering from the weekend. Had a busy weekend ourselves, spending time with my mom and my wife and getting, just like Cory said, here in Ohio with the weather being good, getting some yard work done, getting the garden ready and everything. So I had a busy weekend. Glad to be back and glad to be back on the show.
Awesome.
Well, good.
Yeah. So like Cory was saying, I think sometime throughout the month or every month, there's always some type of an awareness or a focus for something. So May is, like mental health and kind of a disability awareness month. So I'm kind of just approach this a little bit different, give some facts here and how your Medicare ties into, the awareness and how you can seek some treatment and get some help if you need it, and what that's going to look like. So, 1 in 5 Americans have experienced some form of a mental illness. Many of those factors can lead to a mental illness, including genetics, physical injury, or a traumatic life experience. I think we know a lot of people, especially, former service members and things, that can kind of fall into that into that category. A lot of those people, though, do not seek treatment for mental health due to the stereotype that comes with it. So there's a lot of people out there kind of suffering in silence, if you will. And treatment for mental health problems doesn't only consist of medication. Things like different types of therapies, yoga, meditation, and holistic treatments can be, of help. So, a lot of times I think people think, with a mental health or a disability that there's, take a medication and everything's going to get better. But there are some other options out there for you that you don't always have to rely on a medication. But how does Medicare cover mental health or, certain situations like that? So within your Medicare Part A and Part B, there is coverage that's built into that. But I'm going to talk more about, the other types of coverage that people have, So not everybody, but most people are going to have that Medicare Part A and Part B, but they're going to have a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medicare supplement on top of that, statistically. So with a Medicare Advantage plan, most Advantage plans are going to help cover a large range of mental health services compared to original Medicare. Advantage plans can offer more inpatient service, outpatient, mental health, substance abuse, and even that prescription drug coverage. Should you need some form of a prescription. Whereas the Medicare supplement, depending on the type of plan that you have, the most common plans are going to be that Plan F, Plan G, and the Plan N, are going to cover your cost associated with those treatments, excluding prescriptions. Now, depending on your plan, you may or may not have a deductible with that. And then finally, kind of, to wrap this up, with the Part D prescription coverage, whether it's built into your Medicare Advantage plan or you have that standalone Part D coverage, the plan may cover, most of your mental health related prescriptions, but it's always best to check with your pharmacy or your insurance company first to make sure that that prescription is going to be on your drug formulary, or that the insurance company is going to cover that prescription for you and what that cost looks like. So the big thing, or the big takeaway here is, know that there is help out there for you in any situation. Reach out to us, as Cory says all the time. You can call the office 614-760-0670. Everything we do is complimentary. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, mental health's a big thing. I think I think it doesn't matter what age you are, you can kind of deal with it. And I think the main thing to realize here is that there might be options out there. So give us a call and we'll try to help meet your needs.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Well, Cory, what's going on with China and the tariffs? You mentioned that. Let's talk about that.
Obviously, here we are sitting on a Monday, right, Tony? And the market's up over 2% right out of the gate. So They had this weekend, they actually had meetings, right? And what really came out of that is both of them dropped their tariffs by 115%. So the move will drop the Americans' tariffs on Chinese goods, which currently run as high as 145 to 30. And then China's tariffs is going to go from 125 to 10. Now, when you first look at that, there's a little bit of discrepancy. 30% we're still charging versus the 10. So one of the things that we did do at this point in time is we're still have a 20% surplus for the fentanyl to remain in place. And this is for 90 days. So my guess will be is after 90 days, maybe something could actually change and kind of get that down to that. Market likes it. I mean, obviously, I think everybody likes it because over 100% in tariffs. I mean, that's double. That's double the cost, Tony.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, we were worried, and that's why people were talking about a recession and things and the market reacted because, I mean, you had so many things come from China, and you put 100% markup on it.
Sure,
that's a lot.
Sure. And even when we start talking about this, I think a lot of people are still worried about a potential recession, right?
Oh yeah,
Because at the end of the day, if you have a 10% tariff on all goods coming in, pretty much, I mean, things cost 10% more.
Yep.
I don't think these companies are going to eat it, which means
Nope.
it goes down to the consumer, right?
Yep.
So, I think a lot of people are a little bit worried. When we start talking about a recession, what really is the definition of a recession, Tony? And really, a common rule of thumb is it's that when you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product or GDP, that can actually indicate that we're in a recession, right? Now, also, there's also more complex formulas in order to do that. But when you start listening to the news, watching the news, things like that, they're going to talk about those 2 quarters. And if you go back and you look at the first quarter of 2025, it dropped. 2024, we were actually positive. 2025, first quarter, it actually dropped. So now we're in we have that 1 month, that 1 quarter window, right?
Yep.
The other part I think we also have to look at is, what kind of impact our tariffs going to have. I think everyone knows that we've talked about tariffs on the show before, and I think everyone somewhat understands that.
Yeah.
You also kind of have to look at unemployment rates. We got some good job earnings, I think, that just kind of came out a week or so ago. But I still think people are still concerned about potential losses in specific sectors. So unemployment's going to be something we're going to be able to look at. But here's the big one that we have to watch, and that's consumer spending, right?
Yeah.
Are we actually confident, or are we going to be able to see some type of weakening in the actual spend that we're consuming on a daily basis?
And that's what's really going to affect the market and could cause a recession is that is a real thing, not just news of tariffs or what might happen makes the market go up and down. But what really affects it is the performance of the companies. And if that's based on consumerism here in America. So if consumer confidence is low and people aren't buying things, what you're saying is it could really drastically affect the markets.
It could, right? And so one thing I do want to kind of talk about is, how often do we have a recession? If you go back to 1945, it's about every 6.5 years, and it lasts about 11 months. Now, some of those months can vary, and it's not like every 6.5 years it happens. That's just when it's kind of happened, right? But you mentioned something a second ago, Tony, and that is you mentioned that the recession can have an influence on the markets, right? And a lot of times when you start having a negative market, you have a bear market, right? So when you have a bear market, but here's the one thing I think people need to understand. Recessions don't necessarily, recessions and bear markets are 2 different things.
Yep.
Recession is based upon the economy.
Yep.
The bear market is based upon the stock market. Now,
right.
Are you usually in a recession? Does the stock market go down? Yes. But they're still 2 different things. You can still have the market could go down, then the market could go up, start to come back, but you're still in a recession, right? So that's one thing to be able to, I think, make sure you distinguish is recession in the bear market or the market are 2 separate indicators. Now, obviously, again, the recession does have an influence on the market, but they're still 2 different things.
Yeah, that's something that I often forget about that they're separate, and a recession is based on the economy. And I bet a lot of our listeners assume, man, when the markets are down in a bear market and way down and dropping, that's a recession. Well, sometimes they go hand in hand. Usually one affects the other, but the definition of a recession is when the economy isn't doing well, the gross domestic product and consumerism, right?
That's exactly right. It's all based upon the economy, Tony.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll just kind of say before we kind of talk about maybe what you can do, and that is, what's the Fed playing this, right? Well, I think a lot of the Fed's definitely looking at all this because what the big common theme is are they going to lower interest rates? They just met.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that now. They still have kind of projected maybe twice or 2 times this year. They might see a reduction in the interest rates. So it's kind of something to look at to see when they actually make that first step. Obviously, President Trump wants them to do it now.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's been in the news about that, but they haven't done that yet. And so that's something to kind of look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. I know the Fed interest rates play a role too, and these are separate yet things that are tied in. The whole reason the Fed raises and lowers interest rates is to try to control inflation and thereby control the economy somewhat. And I think they're being cautious because they don't want to fuel inflation, but at the same time, I know the president and the markets would like them to lower rates, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. So obviously that's going to be constantly in the news.
Yeah.
Anytime it comes up for them to be, when the Fed does meet, whether the interest rates are going to be dropped, right?
Yep.
So what can we do? And I'm going to talk about some things, Tony, but at the end of the day, from a financial advisor standpoint, these are things that you should be doing anyway.
Right.
And you shouldn't just be doing this because now you're worried about a recession or you're worried about the cost of goods going up, right? And, we talk about this all the time. You never know when you will be out of a job.
Right.
You don't know if you really truly don't know that, right? So it's so important to be able to build some type of emergency fund. We talk about it all the time, but you should have 3 to 6 months of whatever your monthly budget is in your savings account or liquid enough where you can have access to it to pay your bills if something would happen and you can't work.
Right.
Whether you lose a job, whether you become disabled, whether you're, leave of work for some other reason, right? Obviously, if you can have more than that, 9 to 12 months, you're in a lot better position. Yep. But it's so important. Hopefully, most people realize this, when COVID hit, that you do need to have some type of emergency fund. But let's face it, you need to have one.
Yeah.
Because you don't know when a true emergency is going to come. An emergency is just not a job, Tony. It could be all of a sudden your car goes out.
Yeah.
Right. And you need a new car or your air conditioner. You need a new roof. There's other things that come up. That's why it's called an emergency.
Yep. Yeah. And that's huge. And I know that comes up in so many shows. You've talked to us about the importance of emergency funds over and over. And I know a lot of people think, well, I've got some savings, but I don't think a lot of people have truly like 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency fund and keep it at that level or greater. It may take a little bit to get there if you're not there, but once you're there, it's great. And then if you need some of that money, you just got to remember you got to start putting money back into it. So
that's exactly right.
It's a lot better than paying the credit card company because really you're paying yourself and you're not paying the credit card company and paying exorbitant fees because too many people rely on credit cards for emergencies, I would say.
Well, that kind of leads into my next one, Tony, and that is you want to make sure you're also reducing some of this high interest debt, right? It's so important. If you can consolidate, get fixed rates or anything like that, credit cards are over 20%, right? And if you're only making minimum payments, you're going to be paying on that thing forever. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, if you have an emergency fund, if you're getting rid of your debt, hopefully you're going in and reevaluating your budget, right?
Right.
I mean, when times are good, obviously people spend probably more than they should.
They do.
Right. But, from a financial standpoint, Tony, I'm going to tell you that you should always live within your means. Right. And you shouldn't be going into debt, first of all. But, you really need to probably sit down right now and find out where are you truly spending your money? I know like a lot of people don't like to have a budget, but you kind of have to have a good sense of where your money's spending. And is there a way that maybe I cannot spend as much money in these areas to be able to save a little bit per month where I can add to an emergency fund, whether I can add to my own retirement savings as well, right?
Right.
Job security. I mean, we start talking about recession, jobs could be eliminated. This might be a good time to, just in case, reach out on your professional network. You might want to also look into, finding some type of other income streams, right? Whether it's side gigs, freelance work. There's passive income out there as well that if you talk with an advisor, they might be able to help you with. But this is probably a good time just to make sure in case something does happen. Because if we do truly go into a recession, jobs will be eliminated.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
For sure.
Right? So this is a good time. And really when I talk about all that, the things I just mentioned, you should be doing it anyway.
Yeah, everything we're talking about, you should be doing regardless of the situation. These are just smart ways to have a good, successful financial future, period, right?
Right. Exactly right. And maybe the time now is if you think that you might have an issue with your job, this is probably a time to make sure that you aren't buying or having large purchases too.
Right.
So you might want to delay some of those purchases, or buying a new house or a car, or taking on any other type of liability that could actually have an impact on you. Because all that means to you is now you have another thing that you have to add to your budget. It's another fixed cost that's part of your budget. And if it's expensive, it might not make sense to do that until you're sure that your job's going to be safe going forward as well, right?
Yeah, especially if it's a want rather than a need. And even if it is a need, can it wait? I have a friend, that you take the 5-day waiting period. He wanted to buy a side-by-side, quite expensive, a brand new 4-wheeler side-by-side. And because his neighbor got one, he thought it was fun. But he waited. He gave it a 5-day cooling off period. He went, looked at one, priced them. But then he said, nope, I have a rule. I wait 5 days, and he on a big purchase, and he waited 5 days and he realized, oh, I don't really need that. So he just saved himself a bunch of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing I kind of want to just talk about is let's talk about the investment side of it real quick.
Okay.
And if you're worried, this is the time where you really have to make sure you understand what your risk score is.
Yeah.
And you really have to make sure that your investments are following that. So this is a good time to go in, find out what your risk score is. You can go to our website at safeharboroh.com. We have right on the head page, we have your risk analysis that you can take. But it's so important to make sure it's balanced to that, because when the market goes down, you just want to make sure that you can handle that percentage going down. If the market goes down 10 and you're only going to go down 5, you need to know what that kind of impact is, what kind of number that is. Is that $10,000 loss, a $50,000 loss, a $100,000 loss, whatever that might end up being. So you have to make sure you understand that. And this is a great time to be able to do that. Hopefully you did it at the beginning of the year. You should always probably do it at least twice a year, just because you just do want to rebalance all that. This is also a good time to maybe even get into some defensive type stocks, which we call value stocks or dividend type stocks. So again, obviously, before you make any of those decisions, I recommend you talk with an advisor to make sure that they're looking at the way that you are allocated. We can help you to make sure you're allocated the correct way. So it's something that I think that's very important. One thing I would recommend all of our listeners out there, you can always give us a call at 614-760-0670 or visit our website at safeharboroh.com. Again, we're here to help and guide you to make sure you have the best retirement that you can. Just remember, when you schedule that complimentary meeting with us, there's no financial obligation. We're here truly to help you have the best retirement that you possibly can.
All right. Thanks, Cory. Great show today. A lot of great information. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Financially Fit Radio with our host, Cory Sickles.
Thank you for joining us for Financially Fit Radio. Don't head into retirement without a strategy that addresses both income and taxes. For more information, please contact Cory Sickles at Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors at 614-760-0670 or visit safeharboroh.com now. Join us again soon for another episode of Financially Fit Radio.
Investment advisory services are offered by Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and SEC Investment Advisor. Insurance products and services are offered through Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, an affiliated company. Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any government agency. All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.